This is a Socialist News and Views special interview.
Well, okay, so a little formal introduction, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Call me, a nom de plume, is that okay?
Yeah.
Let's go with Raoul Duke.
Okay.
And just leave it at that. A little hint toward Hunter Thompson there. So yeah, just call me Raoul Duke for now. And that, I guess, is that how I introduce myself?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, anything else that, about your background or anything that makes you,
okay.
All
right. Well, okay. So yeah. So I'm Raoul Duke, and I grew up on the border between Texas, South Texas, to be specific, to be hyper-specific, the Rio Grande Valley, and the North Mexican border of Tamaulipas, at the mouth of the Rio Grande, where it flows into the Gulf of Mexico. So I grew up mostly in Mexico, but also in America, and with the beach an hour away, right? And I had a foot on each of these places as I grew up, and I'm fluent in English and I'm fluent in Spanish. I also didn't come from a very on a personal note, I didn't come from a very political family background. We were very apolitical. That being said, and I also never had a lot of faith in Mexican politics. But with AMLO arriving, it really turned my head. It really made me take notice. It's interesting what he's doing. It's really fascinating what he's doing. And I think that we as Americans need to be paying attention to what other countries are doing to better the lives of their citizens and to change the power corruption dynamic that we have right now, the neoliberal one that we have around the world right now.
Yeah. So you've been telling me a little bit about what is going on in Mexico, but if you just want to share with our listeners, some of the things that you've been seeing or hearing, and what you think is ultimately going on, and where this whole process is going right now.
Sure. Okay. So let me begin with a little context. You may or may not have heard of somebody called AMLO, A.M.L.O, AMLO. Right. That's an acronym for the new Mexican president that just got elected 2.5, 3 years ago.
Obrador,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His full name is Andrés Manuel López Obrador. That's his full name. But, people just call him AMLO because it's a lot easier to write and say and remember and all that stuff, right?
Right.
And he turns out that he's a version of Bernie Sanders, leftist, in that won the Mexican presidency here in Mexico. So look at this. This is interesting, right? Trump won in America. Bernie rose to power, and Bernie was vying for his presidential bid. And then over here in Mexico, somewhere in between all that ruckus, AMLO became president in the face of stiff right-wing opposition, right-wing neoliberal opposition, and even left-wing corporate opposition, liberal, right?
Right.
So this guy came to power, and he sets about. He was telling people that and by the way, he ran for president several times and lost or got cheated out of his wins in those several times. But he finally came to power, and he came through a populist front where he was actually championing the indigenous and the poor people of Mexico. You know what I mean? He was praising them and speaking respectfully about them, to them, and so on, about how we can get our country to a better place. And that's part of the reason why he won. And he won by a 66% majority, something like, it was like a bit of a political earthquake, because nobody wins with that much, that's unheard of, apparently, or something like that. But he had a 67, or I don't know, some number. I don't remember the number exactly, but over 60, right?
Right.
So anyway, he comes to power with this. He's basically saying we're going to take Mexico into the fourth transformation. Now, this is an interesting thing that he's saying because the transformation also implies revolution, right? Because Mexico's had three major revolutions, except AMLO doesn't call them revolutions, he calls them transformations, right? Because each one, and he's correct, each one fundamentally transformed the way Mexico evolved politically and economically for the next, decades kind of thing, right?
Right.
So he's basically saying, look, we're going to have Republican austerity. We're going to have government austerity. We're going to obey the law as written, right?
Right.
So and we're also going to what was he saying here?
So just quick, sometimes when people hear austerity, they're thinking about cutting social programs and things like that, but that's not what you're talking about here, right?
Exactly. I love AMLO. It's great. He took this neoliberal word, austerity, or even the neoliberal phrase government austerity, where it means the government's going to take away funding from these public services because, economics and stuff, right? We got to fix the books or something. You guys, and thus when they do that, they let in the private. Basically, they force people to use privatized versions of that public good that used to be provided at public cost. But in this particular case, what AMLO is talking about is, a Republican austerity is what he calls it. I'm still wrapping my head around it. But he's saying, like, look, we're going to cut the salaries of our politicians, our judges. We're going to take that money that we've saved from cutting that and cutting a bunch of other government, excesses, right? Perks and stuff that we don't really need, that he feels you don't really need if you really want to work in government. He feels like the Mexican elite have pampered themselves too much, right? So he's like, okay, we can cut back on this stuff. And now we have the money to provide all these social services.
Right.
That's his game, right? So.
So what kinds of things is he doing now then with the money, or what things is he planning? Do you know?
Oh, okay. Well, not in the. I can't. I can give you my limited understanding because I don't follow it as closely as I like. I follow world news in general, U.S. very specifically, and European, and then Mexico third. And I dip my toe every now and then, but I can give you a general, broad understanding. And basically, what I'm doing is I'm pointing the finger and saying, you all should pay attention to what's going on over here because I think there's something we can learn from this situation as citizens of America.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that AMLO is one of the things he speaks he speaks eloquently, and very proddingly. He has a specific cadence that's very prodding. I don't know how else to describe it.
Sure.
Okay. Where he tries to be very clear and very concise, and he's very careful with the words he's choosing. And I think. And one of the things he says is like he wants a government that's going to respect and attend to everyone, right? He says these things in a national broadcast that he does, right? He says our government we're going to work to get rid of corruption, and we're going to work to make our government respect and attend to everyone, as best we can,
right,
including the poor. He says it. And this is, again, in stark contrast to how our neoliberal American system works. Over here, the government has been gutted, and the services are, I personally think, like the customer service with institutions, where it's all automated.
Right.
I'm quite soulless, and I a lot of times I don't find the option I'm looking for, and there's no recourse for me to find somebody to talk to and straighten this out. So literally I'm in an impossible situation right now. And in the Mexican side, you can go talk to somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you see the difference there, right? That's one of those things that I'm. So anyway,
No,
another thing
that's good.
What? Sorry.
I said that's good. Yeah,
Yeah, it's good.
I agree with you.
Thank you. So another thing he was also aiming for as a kind of broad thing about his fourth transformation is the separation of political power from economic power. Now, listen to that.
It sounds good.
Like he's telling the public, hey, look, we got to work on separating these two elements because they're a problem. You know what I mean? And if you know a little bit about history, like one of I think the second revolution in Mexico or transformation in Mexico was the separation of church and state.
Mm. So it's right on the same lines there.
So you see how decades, centuries later, this guy comes along and says, okay, we've done the separation of church and state. Now we got to do the separation of political power from economic power.
Another thing you sent me the other day was about the providing the packages of books to citizens, books on social, cultural, and economic rights. Can you say any more about that?
I would love to, and I will get to that.
Sure.
Can I get to that a little bit later?
Please do. Take your time. I just wanted to make sure
Remind me if I forget, but
make sure we hit everything.
I got a lot of front loading to get through here.
No, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. And basically, I understand English and Spanish, except my Spanish has gotten quite dusty. So some terms are a little, but anyway, I love listening to this guy speak, this AMLO guy. Oh, okay. Part of him coming into office was him basically changing the ways the government worked. And he was quite clever about it. So he basically promised it. When he got into office, he put the presidential airplane up for sale. And the Mexican president airplane was more expensive than the American airplane for some reason. $100 million or something. And wow. It was super luxurious. It was kind of a symbol of neoliberalism in a way, right? And AMLO rejected it, and he said, "Nope, we don't need that anymore. If you're going to be a president of Mexico, you can fly commercial. You can fly commercial just like everybody else." And that's what he does, right? He basically did that. He got rid of the presidential car, the security car, the bulletproof car, that all presidents get or whatever.
Right.
He got rid of that, and he drives around a little Volvo, I think, or something. Something very, very mundane. He got rid of, and this is really earth-shattering, he got rid of the president's security team, like this president's security army. There were like 6,000 of these guys. Ridiculous number. But the 6,000 or so people that were part of his security detail got dispersed into other departments, other security operations. Wow. He's basically like, if you're going to be the president of the Mexican people and they love and respect you, you shouldn't need this. You only need this if you're making people angry. So you don't need future presidents. You don't need this. I'll show the way. So he got rid of those guys. Right? You with me?
Oh, I'm with you.
All right. Now, he also created the National Guard out of thin air and basically said, okay, all you security elements that I let go, you can go into the National Guard if you like and be part of that thing. And that's kind of like it's like a branch of the army that but it's a National Guard and they're all over and they're meant to be helpers and like helper soldiers. So they're security soldiers for internal problems like, the mafia problems that Mexico has. And also for natural disasters and even for citizen assistance. And I'll get to that in a little bit later. Okay. The National Guard is an interesting thing. And I see them on a daily basis, patrolling the streets or positioned in places. And that's, I think so far it's a good thing. I also heard rumors that he disbanded the Federales, which is like the Mexican equivalent of the FBI. I haven't confirmed that, but that's still pretty interesting because there's a lot of corruption in that institution. So that hopefully is something that it turns out to be true. I need to confirm that. Okay, wait. So he got rid of the airplane. He got rid of his presidential car, his security detail. He flies commercial. He drives a Volvo. Oh, right. And he promised the Mexican people, he recognized the severity of the moment for Mexico. He's like, look, we're in crisis. We got a lot of corruption. We got a lot of like violence. We got a lot of like our country's very insecure. He recognized all of this to the public. He says, and we need to transform this country in a peaceful way. He stresses peaceful, right?
Right.
By following and refining the laws and getting rid of all this government excess. And part of the reason how I'm going to show you that I'm serious about this, me, the president, is I'm going to be Monday, like every day, I'm going to give a mañanera. Mañanera is a morning talk. So every morning at 7 o'clock at the presidential, no, it's in a church in Mexico City, in downtown Mexico City. It's like an abandoned church that they turned into an impromptu meeting hall, right? And he said, he told them, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna be there every morning at 7 o'clock to talk to you about the nation's problems and to address the nation's problems. And I will have my ministers with me, and they will answer questions for you. And cleverly, listen, putting his ministers on the spot.
Right.
Be like, you're not just gonna report to me; you're reporting to the public now. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And everything about him is like, don't be corrupt. But in a kind of nice but stern way, like, hey, stop doing that. Like, I'm going to put you in positions where you're going to be held accountable.
Right.
You know what I mean? Okay. So he's doing these mañaneras. Literally, he's been doing these mañaneras all this time. Fascinating stuff, man. Like, really, the reporters that are working for the Mexican establishment, right wing, and how they're trying to like set him up or trip him up, and the way he handles himself, and it's really quite fascinating. And it hasn't been an easy go for him. He's had to deal with a lot of, strife in the political parties, but he's also shaking the boat and getting results. But I'll get into that later. I'm still talking about. So I was telling you about he does the mañaneras, right? The early day, and
right.
He's been doing that forever, and you can find them all on YouTube, by the way, but they're not translated to English, unfortunately. And then he cut his presidential salary in half. Right?
Right. That's significant.
It's very significant.
Indeed.
Because 10 years ago, before A.M.L.O came to power, and again, I'm not sure how many years ago it was. I'm just going to say 10 years ago. There was a law that somebody else put into place, not A.M.L.O, somebody else. Some other entity in the political government of Mexico put in a law that's basically said something like no political functionary, bureaucrat, etc., can have a higher salary than the president of Mexico.
Mm.
So 10 years pass, along comes A.M.L.O. A.M.L.O knows that law's in the books, and he says, I'm just going to cut my salary in half. Instead of giving me $100,000, give me $50,000, whatever. I don't need that much. I'm a humble guy. Forcing everybody else, the whole government structure, to re-examine their salaries.
Do you know what effect that had? Were there politicians that actually also had to cut their salaries? Do you know?
Yeah, they had to cut their salaries, and there was so where it got interesting in that regard is the Supreme Court judges of Mexico had ridiculous perks, just extravagant pay, extravagant perks, just like ridiculous.
Right.
And when he did this, when A.M.L.O cut his presidential salary in half, he really upset their apple cart. So they literally started a kind of a mini war between the president of Mexico and the Supreme Court justices, who were like, no, we're going to challenge this in our court, and we're going to rule on it, and you're going to lose because we're the Supreme Court justices, boy.
Right.
And A.M.L.O's like, bring it. And because he gets to control where they operate out of. They can send them work in the boonies if it doesn't go his way. Okay, fine. For the next 4 years, you're operating out of, the butt end of the colony or whatever.
So he's got a lot of power to change things. I mean, he's got a lot of discretion, it seems like, in a lot of things.
You know what? The Mexican president is very powerful. He's not all powerful.
Right.
But, he's got, seriously, he's got clout to twist things around. Now, there's a lot of right-wing opposition, right-wing establishment opposition, and there are, I suspect, elements that are funded by the U.S. in Mexico, and to kind of continue the status quo neoliberal order of corruption and back dealing and this kind of thing. And AMLO's over here trying to clean it up.
Right.
So they're constantly trying to smear him and denigrating him in the Mexican media. So here in Mexico, there's a divide between people. A certain percentage really don't like this guy, and a whole bunch other percentage do. And so
cleaning up the perks and everything was something he got elected on. So does he still have all mass support then? Or how is his support amongst working people, amongst the public right now?
That's hard to judge. But I seriously, everybody that I live in Mexico, that I hang out, family members and stuff, they're all right wing and don't know it.
Sure.
So they all have a sort of negative perspective on this guy. But it also has to do with race and class and economics, and people on a lower economic class and race scale, like the more indigenous people of Mexico, really like the guy because they think he's actually doing the right thing.
Right.
They really believe his message, and they understand because he speaks directly to them in these meetings. He says, "I need the people's help to clean up this country. I can't do it on my own. Please help me."
It sounds like Bernie Sanders.
Right. Except this guy's actually getting things done.
Right?
I'm sorry.
No.
I got to call it how like it is, man. I love Bernie, but he didn't get it done, man.
On the aside, so you said all these people around you are right wing and don't know it. So how did you end up with the perspectives that you have and the interest in this kind of politics that you have?
Well, okay. I'm gonna tell you right up. I consider myself an eco-socialist, even though I haven't really nailed down everything. But in the general sense, I believe that we can do better ecologically, and it'll benefit everybody if we kind of focus on improving our environment, kind of thing. It'd be better for us if we try to incorporate the word harmony into our lives.
Makes sense.
We Americans don't use the word harmony a lot unless they're in a band.
That's true.
I think
that's America for you.
Well, I think we can change a lot of things. We can choose a lot of different things. That's America too, and I think we need to choose to incorporate a little more harmony in our citizens' lives, right? And I came to this position in my life, stumbling in the dark, but always reading a lot and questioning and having questions in my head that were never answered up until I got to a certain point in my life, in age, and I saw enough things. I had enough experience where things clicked.
Right.
And then I would read the next guy. I would challenge myself a little. Not challenge. It was very, I started off as when I was a locksmith in Florida. My bosses all listened to right-wing radio, and I didn't know any better. I was apolitical at the time. So I drove around Florida for 6 months listening to right-wing radio. Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Bill O'Reilly. I mean, all this vile, putrid cesspit of the very demons of I don't know the that
I hear you.
Right wing hate radio,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And eventually, I got to the point where I'm driving around doing my job, and I get sick of hearing these guys because they're shutting people down. They're being rude to them. They're not like listening respectfully or courteously. They're talking over them and being bullies. And after I don't know, I don't think it took me 6 months. I think it took 3 months. I literally, after 3 months of moronically and blindly listening to whatever these guys were listening to, I turned the dial and I started looking for something. And I didn't want to listen to music. I just wanted to hear an interesting conversation, And I remembered that there was what was it, NPR? Yeah, or not NPR. It was the public broadcasting channel that's on the FM, AM dial in the southern parts of America. And I remembered that, and I turned it to AM, and I ended up finding NPR, the channel, and I started listening to that, and it was night and day. And it was night and day, and it was very reasoned conversations and thoughtful perspective, and no yelling over, none of this right wing hate radio. I don't know how to describe it.
Right. So,
sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, you mentioned books too. I was just gonna kind of see if you wanted to throw out a couple of things you've read recently before we go back to the AMLO thing. I was just gonna throw that out there.
What have I read recently? Well, David Graeber's Debt: The First 5,000 Years is one of the books I'm currently working through. It's fascinating. David Graeber's great. A really good book that explains to you the evolution of this term we call debt and how different, and I can talk about that for an hour, but I won't. I also read Richard Wolff. He's got several books that The Sickness is the System, I think, is one of them. And that's also a really fascinating book as well. I have a whole backlog of things that I need to be reading.
No, that's good. I just wanted to get a little perspective here what you're reading. Yeah, sorry. So I didn't want to take too much time aside, but yeah, if you want to talk, keep going a little bit about Obrador. Yeah.
Thank you. So about AMLO, he's pretty much done a lot of the things he's promised. I was looking at somebody right now saying 95 of his political promises are being fulfilled out of 100 commitments that he took place. So that's really good. I need to look at those closely.
Right. I was going to say, if that's true, that doesn't happen in the U.S. very often.
No, it doesn't.
If ever.
And exactly. And also another thing that I wanted to point out is that AMLO is quite direct in attacking neoliberalism. And he mentions it by name, and he talks about it. And he's not the only one. There's lots of Latin countries right now that are critical of the neoliberal order as it is. But I just want to point out that AMLO actually talks about it and blames it as one of the problems plaguing Mexico.
Right.
I find that quite fascinating. That he's so.
If we're gonna take any of this stuff on, we got to start naming names, naming what things are, right? So
calling things what they are.
And that's possibly where Bernie sometimes falls down. Because I think sometimes he's not willing to call out the Democrats as strongly or as directly for some of the things that they do.
Right. Well, I'm always going to love Bernie for having opened that door and held it open for the left to sort of come back into the conversation on the American stage, and for getting that conversation started. But I think we need to take it further.
Absolutely.
So everybody, the citizenry, us, we have to take it further than what Bernie Sanders is. Bernie Sanders is only willing to go so far with this whole thing. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And we need to find the people that are willing to go the next inch or the next millimeter and push those people forward and support those people. AMLO winning is just something really, really fascinating. And I think a lot of people should be paying attention to what this guy's doing. Because can you imagine... can you imagine Washington cutting everybody's salary
No.
in half for
No.
the elite? You know, any one of our dear leaders, you know, stepping forward and saying, you know, I'm the Minister of Transportation and I'm going to cut my salary in half, and the other half we can use for public transportation. Here you go. I don't need that much money. I can live in this humble house and drive a humble car. I don't need a private jet. Do you think that's ever going to happen?
No.
No, right? But it's happening in Mexico, bro. So that is that is always something very fascinating. Oh, okay. And one of the things that we talked about earlier was the books that he's sending out. So AMLO's government is printing out these lovely set of books that he sends to whoever wants them, and some places are actually providing them without even asking. And these books are, let me see here. Let me find the file that has them. Here they are. So there's a book set that says the political constitution of the United States of Mexico, like the general law of institutions and election procedures, the general law of political parties, like basically all the technical books to how the political parties work. He's sending that out for free, right? The Declaration of Universal Human Rights. That's a book he's sending out for free, right?
Right.
His political party called Morena, which their tagline is "The Hope of Mexico." He's sending out the basic political documents of what Morena should stand for.
Mm.
You know what I mean? As opposed to the reality, I guess. A book on the origin of violence against the woman. Another book on the rights of women with a queer eye perspective on gender, right? Another book on the political rights of women in Mexico.
What is that? I think I'm looking at that one. What is that in Spanish?
Derechos políticos de las mujeres en México.
Oh, yeah, there I see it. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I think I'm looking at the same page.
Oh,
I tried to pull up those
so
pictures,
I'm swiping now to the other page. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to swipe past this one. That one I'm also going to swipe past. Let's see here. That's the whole set there. Okay, I think we... there's another book called Protocols for the Attention to Political Violence Against Women and Reasons of Gender. Yeah. So... this is a book he put out. Okay, so here are the 6 books and another thing. So these are really interesting. So you're going to get, if you order these books, you're going to get these other 6 books, which are starting with the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, right?
Right.
Then you're going to get the Pact on International Rights, Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention over the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against the Women, not the women. The International Pact on Civil and Political Rights. The other book is International Conventions on Eliminating All Forms of Racial Discrimination.
Wow.
And the last one, the Convention on the Rights of Handicapped and Faculty Affected People. Those are the 6 books you get in that pack.
Have you like really looked through any of these books at all, or have you just seen them at the covers and stuff?
I mean, the covers, and I flipped through them. I just saw them the other day. I just found out yesterday. I just want to point out that it sends a very powerful message, I think, to the people in our country when your president is well-spoken, erudite, eloquent, and has a reason behind his things. He's upsetting the political power cart. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's trying to tell people, look, like we're fight against corruption if we're going to make a better place, and we have to be nice to people, and our government has to serve poor people. Hey, by the way, here's a bunch of books starting with the human rights book.
Yeah, I think certainly informing people about their rights is a huge step in the process of building the kind of society that can get rid of all these, people in power and people with undue influence on the political process, etc. Like a lot of my work has been like union work, and any chance that the employer has to, hide or not respond or not give you the information that you need, they take every chance that they have. And so, if the people in power are giving you some of the information about your rights, especially without even you requesting it or you pushing for it, well, that's going in the right direction for sure.
It's really, I look over across the border, because remember, I have one leg in each country. I understand both countries, and it's really fascinating what this guy's accomplishing in his presidency. And at the same time, I get to see the United States and go, why doesn't this happen? Why hasn't this conversation happened?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Certainly gives you a different perspective, and hopefully, gives you additional expectations on what we should be doing here in the States.
Not only expectations, but maybe demands.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think demands is probably the better option here. We need a demand.
We got to get organized to make demands. That's where that's
right. Organization. You know what I mean. Getting to know your brother and sister, citizen, and and figuring out a way to make the country a better place as opposed to just running in place.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing right here, right now, is talking to each other, learning about what's going on, so that we can keep our eyes on progress. And I think we're all, like you said, brothers and sisters across the whole globe, and I think we all need to be keeping an eye on what's going on in every other country and calling it out when it's not in the interests of regular people, and trying to show solidarity when folks are moving towards a more just, equal, and fair society.
Absolutely. And actually, that's one of the things that I think needs to happen is that we need to have more conversations. We need to have a podcast or show of some kind where we're bringing in the lefties from the European Union and giving us some context and real-time on-the-ground information as well, and history of their struggles over there and how they relate to our struggles over here. If I could just take a minute to explain.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, like, over here, we're struggling for Medicare for all. You know what I mean? That's a struggle where is ongoing here in the United States.
Right.
But, for example, Norway and most of Scandinavia already had that debate, already had that struggle. And it came out, hands down, we're having universal health care, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what I would say is I would want to bring on like a Norwegian, a French guy, whatever, a German guy, sit them down and go, okay, so when this happened, when this struggle happened in your country, who were the people opposing this idea, and what were their arguments? And who were the people backing this idea? What were their arguments? Is there any correlation between these arguments and our arguments over here? And what can we learn from them? You know what I mean? And we're going to learn that the right wing is always scaremongering and fear-mongering and, making mountains out of molehills. And
you can just look at the history of the struggles we have engaged in the United States to see that, right? Look at, the struggle against segregation or whatever, and all of the, blowing things out of proportion and saying, this is the end of society and this goes against God, and all the other tropes that the right wing pulls out for anything that they don't agree with.
Right, exactly. And I think there's elements of that back in those struggles in Norway. There must have been right-wing elements of that, but they lost. They whatever argument there was, they didn't do it well. And I think we should study all of that. And have a real-life Norwegian say, well, you know what, the right wing was pushing back on this, but there were too many people that were invested in this idea as a citizen good that we can afford and we should invest in because X, Y, and Z statistical, scientifically proven factors will make our lives better. And so we chose that reason. And also, it's the humane thing to do. So we chose that reason. You know what I mean? We need to have their insight into this, and I think that's. I look forward to someday getting that going.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I appreciate you talking to me, and we have a lot of work to do in the United States to push things forward, and I think we can do it. And I agree with you. We need to turn our eyes towards other countries where they are winning some of these struggles, and see what they're doing, and see what's been done historically, both in the U.S. and around the world.
Absolutely, man.
That's the end of our special interview. If you have questions, comments, concerns about this interview on AMLO, please send those to socialist.news.views@gmail.com.
This has been a Socialist News and Views special interview.